What is up? It's your boy MiniTV, guys. Our prayers have been answered. 7.27, ladies and gentlemen, is here. Relax, rejoice, and rewards are aplenty. Anyway, guys, got a video coming out just really on the implications of this patch. Obviously, there wasn't any hero changes, so I just wanted to be talking about how this affects Dota, how we play it, how even your favorite heroes, even though they haven't been changed or touched directly, will definitely be changing our playstyle and how we play them in terms of items, in terms of where we play on the map, yada yada yada. So, without further ado, let's get into it, boys. So first off, I think is just kind of something that's been needing to happen. A lot of pros talking about it. Seb has been talking on and on about it, how kills need to be offering more, and in this patch we do. Obviously the base XP. Like, I'm not going to go through every change. I just want to talk about the implications and the big things really. I think particularly the most important thing about really the hero kill changes is actually the like level 1 bounty kills are really important now, or more impactful. I actually mentioned it a few times in a few of my recent coaching sessions where it's really not worth kind of giving your life up for the bounty runes, but it's especially more important not to do that now, because these early kills give even more, obviously, because of the not only with XP but with gold as well, so nearly double in the XP for level 1 bounty rune exchanges. So really be careful not to be feeding away first blood for bounty runes. It's just really not worth it. Talking about runes, they are now reliable gold, which is a little bit helpful with buyback status, but doesn't really change too much in terms of playstyle. The tower last hit bounty reduced throughout the stages of tier 1 to tier 4. Now this I think is actually quite a big change. So last patch we saw a lot of kind of snowball kind of meta. Obviously we had a lot of zoo, obviously, but that kind of grouping up death balling, and kind of just one tower leads to the next one, and then each tower giving more and more advantage. Whereas now obviously there's less gold in towers in general, but more gold in hero kills. So because of that, those really the two changes here are probably the two biggest ones in terms of overall playstyle, in that objectives will be less rewarding and kills will be more. So because of that, the pace should in theory slow down, although obviously kills will eventually lead into objectives. But before it, you could have games where there'd be low kill score, but towers are obliterated before the 15-minute mark, and because of that, map control is just conceded, and then one team just takes a massive gold lead by just farming and keeping the enemy base penned in. And that was kind of the play style, really. Don't go up high ground, just keep the enemy team penned in and just accumulate a massive lead just by farming creeps, not by killing heroes. Whereas now, I feel that because of the change, and not only that, heroes are giving more in terms of gold and experience, so there's more chances for comebacks, because obviously the net worth assist gold has been increased. So obviously, if someone's got a lot of net worth, you kill them, they're going to be giving more gold back. But also objective gold is less, so the less snowballing potential because of that. So in theory, it should be slower games and more chance for comebacks and that kind of turtling playstyle. Because if you lose an objective, it's not considerable amount lost. A 5% increase in neutral stacking support bounty. It doesn't seem like much, but it's actually about a 13 or 12% increase, because of obviously 35% one out of seven, and then 14 from that. So quite a big jump actually. And now, I mean, if you think about it, it's like, if you stack two camps, that's nearly a whole camp just given gold wise to a support. So really important that stacking, when you're playing supports now, just stacking whenever you can, leaving the lane to go stack at the the 15-second mark, is really important. And again, this kind of idea of turtling and farming, and playing defensive just helps with that. But 40% is loads if you're considering how it used to be. I think it's like 10 or 15% when it originally came out. So quite a big deal. Few changes to the creep camps. Really not too big changes really. The prowler camp was obviously removed, so that kind of in some ways affects some of the mid heroes who are able to clear ancients like Storm's SF, for example, because you could just kill it with magic creeps, but they're gone, and I think that's an overall happiness. And without the outpost change, I think, is really big, that we'll go through and talk about. So I've played quite a few games on this patch, and that's the reason why I haven't. This patch implication video is coming out later than all the other ones because I wanted to get a feel of what the implications of this patch, how to play it and stuff. And this outpost no longer being able to be stolen by the other team unless you have a tier two, I think is really big. And so I think because of this change, what we're going to see here is first of all that tier twos are going to be higher prioritized into either taking them or defending them. Before it was almost like just give up our tier twos. They don't mean anything. Obviously they used to do used to give more kind of gold and stuff. Sorry, less gold. I don't know what I'm talking about. Forget the last 5 seconds. What I'm trying to say is that now giving up an outpost or giving up a tier two and not trading yourself is big because the enemy team can just go walk in, take your outpost, and then play in that side of the map. And there's no way that you can't mirror that side of the map because you can't take their outpost. So there's always opportunities for the other team to to gank you and enter into that kind of part of the jungle. Because obviously, naturally, Dota, you want to be kind of mirroring the other team. But if you can't take the enemy's outpost and they've taken yours because they have taken the tier two tower, it's very difficult to mirror that safely. So really important that you keep up tier two towers. But in terms of heroes, this is quite important because naturally, after a tier one is taken, the tier two is always going to be pressured and slowly chipped down at. So because of that, I'm seeing a lot of carries that are very difficult to displace from the lane. So heroes that are very strong to sort of just sit in the safe lane and defend. So heroes I've talked about in the past, like Ursa, Life Stealer. The enemy team doesn't really want to smoke, gank, and kill the enemy carry in the tier one tower because they're very difficult to kill. Maybe Void as well. These kind of elusive or tanky heroes in the safe lane as carries. Necrophos, Venomancer, I think might see a comeback as position one or carry or safe lane because they defend the tier one tower. If you keep the tier one tower up, then it will keep your tier two up longer as well, and that kind of snowball effect won't happen. Whereas hopefully on your team, you'll be able to take their tier one, take the tier two, and once you do that, you can just play in the enemy jungle because they can't take your outpost and you're defending yours, so they have no outpost to take. So again, that kind of big impact going forward. Another big implication and change, particularly this is for the offlaners, where you can no longer creep skip really between the tier two and the tier three. You can do it between the tier one and tier two, but it's very harder and more punishing because you're just almost that 1550 range is about the pool camp kind of area where it is at. And so because of that, you're quite close to the tier one tower, so the enemy carry can rotate over, can harass you alongside with the support that would normally do that. Whereas before you would see heroes like Batrider and Axe cut between the tier two and the tier three, and then they'd also farm that hard. So say for example, if you're Dire Batrider or Dire Axe, you'd take the creeps and then also farm the hard camp between just kind of off from the mid tier two. And there was nothing the enemy team can do that. But obviously you can't do that anymore. And so this is a big change because the heroes that wanted to do that, so like heroes like Axe and Batrider, are just a little bit worse because they can no longer do that or no longer do it as safely as before. But this is important as well from the safe lane side of things because a hero that you would pick to lane dominate, like Ursa, like Monkey King, and a few other carries. The annoying thing would be, or like Slark, for example, as well, that the enemy offlaner would just completely leave the lane and just skip it. So the strength of you as a Monkey King in the safe lane would be that you can crush melee offlaners. But the problem would be that the enemy offlaner would just go and creep skip, and you'd be just forced with just CSing under tower, which doesn't kind of play to your strengths. Whereas now the enemy offlaner can no longer creep skip, so they're forced to lane against you. And if you're a Monkey King versus like a Tidehunter or like any other melee, like an Underlord, Slark versus Underlord or Earth versus Underlord, you'll just crush that melee offlaner now, and there's not really much play round for that offlane to do. So in that respect, it's actually nice. Another implication of this actually is actually defensive tri lanes are we'll most likely see a comeback from that as well. You know, if you were running a tri lane, and then the enemy offlaner back would just cut the wave, you know, you'd be wasting all the resources having a tri lane and a safe lane. But again, now they can't really creep skip, particularly not safely. So we might see more defensive tri lanes. Before we'd never see we'd see aggressive tri lanes because of the same reason, like you could creep skip. But defensive tri lanes were almost never a thing. Whereas now, you know, we could see defensive tri lanes and have these heroes that are, you know, mega hyper carries, maybe like anti mages, for example, that have protection of having two supports, and you can just crush the enemy offlaner. Which I think we might see a comeback now. Because of this not creep skipping. Could be an interesting change to sort of see and wait and see. Curry bounty, not really much change really, just that they're a bit slow with carrying consumables, so perhaps we might need to be adding or starting with more regen in the lane for our side laners. The tower changes, not really too much impactful. The only thing that's pretty noticeable is loss hitting is actually really annoying, and I think you'll need time to kind of get used to that. The all picking change I think is really interesting. I'm not going to talk about the competitive side of things. I want to just talk about the pub meta, with this 1-1, sorry, the 2-2-1 instead of the usual 1-1-1-1. So before, offlaners were kind of getting shafted, because of the fact that um, the carry would always see the matchup, and so you'd always be getting unfavorable matchups as an offlaner. Now, however, you're picking at the same time, most likely. I say that in quotes because I'm going to talk about something later. So, you could pick a hero like Bat, for example, and the enemy hero could pick someone not like a Jug, so you'd have more chances of having a decent matchup, for example. Not only that, though, is that I feel that luck is actually a big factor, which is in some ways I don't particularly like, because I don't think luck was never really a big factor in Daria. It's not like a card game, for example, like Hearthstone, where luck is actually a big factor. Obviously, there's some RNG when it comes to passives, for example, but for the most part, it doesn't really change too much. But I feel like with this picking phase now, like, you know, you can get really unlucky, because most likely what the picking phase is that the two supports will pick first, and that's just normal, and then you'll have the carry and the offlaner pick at the same time. Now, if you get unlucky in that your carry um, uh, is countered by their enemy carry just because of the matchup. So, for example, I pick anti-mage because the two supports don't do much against anti-mage, and the enemy team picks troll warlord, then I'm just kind of screwed and there's not much I can do. Same goes for the offlaners and the carries picking at the same time, although the offlaners were getting shafted anyway. But, you know, the same is being said. Now, there's something that 1437 Theben said that I think might be interesting. We might see now, where actually carries will be given the last pick. Normally it was always the mids, but now we're sort of seeing heroes like Kunkers and DKs where they're good against most matchups, and that last pick carry can make a big difference because you get to counter pick obviously the mid offlane and the carry mirror matchup as well, which we could definitely see coming into effect. Because I think carries this patch is very carry centric. We talked about the lanes just seem to be a little bit nicer for the carries, because the enemy offlaner can't cut. Obviously, last patch we also had the buff to the tier 1 towers as well, giving regen and armor, which is another nice buff to carries that offlaners don't have. Given to them as well, so it'd be interesting to sort of see that develop and change. But that's my ideas of what's going to be happening. Um, and then we got some just quality life changes here as well, with the fountain diving is a bit more difficult to do, and neutral items a bit more even. So I think I'll talk about a few of the item changes as well. I think a lot of the item changes are quite impactful, and so because of that, people will be picking them up less or more depending on. So I will go through the item changes, but just overall talking about the gameplay changes, I think we will see a more turtle-esque kind of Dota, where games are lasting a bit longer, but also there's more aggressive playstyle as well, more turtling in terms of turtling from objectives, but there's definitely aspects to be played where kills are very, very impactful and very useful because of the increase in gold and experience. But the nice buff to stacking as well, so people being able to farm. I've seen alchemists really have a nice rise in kind of popularity, because not only in the stacking aspects, but also because of, particularly in the mid lane, where some of the creep camps are in a nicer position for him. Another thing that I forgot to mention as well is that um, the whole idea of the dead lane concept might be re-looked at for a few reasons. So, the dead lane kind of got somewhat of a buff in terms of for Radiant, because the Radiant Ancients are in the off lane. Because normally, obviously, the carries, come 10, 15 minutes, they want to be playing the off lane part of the map. For Die, that was nice because you always had the Ancients to fall back on, but the Radiant you never did, because the Ancients were in your own jungle, which you normally want to play the triangle. Whereas now the Ancients are in the triangle, and you also get a chance to play around Roche, so another kind of Radiant buff, I think, in that patch. But because of the change of the outposts, I think your own jungle is a little bit more safe now, so there might be a slight change in actually carries playing their own safe lane, or their own jungle as well. But we'll have to see that come to fruition as well. So as of items, Necronomicon kind of got nerfed quite heavily. I think the big thing is the mana regen got reduced, as well as Sobi Mask, or Sage's Mask, whatever it's called, also got nerfed as well. And not only that, but the kind of big aspect of picking Necronomicon up was that it was kind of like a Midas, because you'd be able to farm so quickly. But with the damage changing from piercing to hero damage, you do a lot less damage versus creeps, but you do more damage against heroes. So maybe Lycan and maybe Beastmaster will still pick it up. But it won't be an item where, like, offlane AA, well, we saw Boxy do it for Liquid, or Queen of Pain, Necronomicon won't really be a thing. Bit shame, because I think Enigma Necro will be gone as well. Although I think Necro Enigma might be still decent because it's still good against heroes like in a black hole, but maybe less so because of the mana regen nerf, which was a really big aspect. I play a lot of offlane Enigma, and that was a really nice item for the hero. Helmadom and Vlad, I'm going to kind of put these both into a bit of a combination, where I feel like Helmadom and Vlad's were both quite nice as somewhat of core items because of the auras that they give and the stats that they provide. But now they don't really offer as much of that. Obviously, the damage amp from the Helm of Dom was the big thing, particularly when you see anything about Luna carry, for example. With that being gone, this seems more of a support item. Same goes for Vlad's, because it doesn't offer any stats anymore. So it's more of the aura being an important part of the item. So that normally will be tend towards the support. As for Helmadom, I think the creep itself is really strong. So heroes like Invoker, maybe Enchantress, could be useful because they really benefit, and I guess Beastmaster as well. They benefit from the creep being strong and no longer about the aura as much, really. Obviously Invoker, because of like Alacrity, for example, plus Closed Snap, can be really good. I think Drum's got a really big buff, I think, this patch. Really nice core item, particularly for offlaners, like offlane Prophet. It was already kind of good on, now it's even better because it's just cheaper, and the attack speed got a nice little buff as well to the active. So all kind of nice items all together, and the stats are a little bit better as well than before. Mech and Greaves just kind of nerf overall to a lot of auras. I mean, that was a big part of the patch last patch is all about these auras, really. So a kind of nerf across the board for auras in general. Mech kind of still being quite good though, because it provides the 3 armor in it itself. Blade Mail kind of got it's an interesting one with Blade Mail, because in some aspects it kind of got a buff, and some aspects kind of got a nerf, because obviously it no longer has 8 intelligence. So kind of the reason why a lot of people were picking up before is because it was a really nice int item. So heroes like Prophet were really benefiting from it because of the 8 intelligence. And also the build up is just kind of worse because it's the recipe instead of a Roman Magi. And also the active return is less, but it's actually now 20% of it is actually in the passive component as well as 20. So it's kind of like a mini retaliate. So heroes that buy the blade mail for the effects, I feel it's almost a little bit better, because it's still 100. I believe it's still 100%, because even though it's the active is now 80%, the 20% is just passive normally, but it's also a plus 20 to it as well. So it's a slight little buff, plus the armor is increased as well. So heroes like Legion and Axe, I feel like Blade Mail got a little bit better, but then heroes that were buying it for heroes like Queen of Pain or Prophet got a little bit worse because it's no longer like an intelligence item. That being said, as well, 7 intelligence on a strength hero that did like to buy it, like Axe, for example, had quite a severe low mana pool. Their intelligence does do quite a nice bit of aspects. Just kind of skip past that because not too big of importance. The Orchid got like a nice buff. I mean, it lost 5 in and 1.5 mana regen, but the build up got a lot better from 10 to 5, so a big buff in terms of percentage, and the cost has been reduced as well. So heroes that are buying Orchid, like Prophet for example, got better just simply from this buff. So see like a rise on heroes that were buying Orchid. Shadowblade, kind of very similar. Really, the cost of it is exactly the same because Amulet got a reduction, and the attack speed is kind of negligible with the damage nerf as well. But kind of a buff to Shadowblade in the sense that heroes that were buying Shadowblade and Echo Saber got a buff in the sense that Echo Saber now builds into something useful. Before you were having heroes that wanted to build maybe like an Echo Saber, like Slark, like Sven, but you almost never wanted to buy the item because it would eventually fall off and you'd have to sell it. Whereas now it builds into Silver's Edge is a win-win. So a hero like Slark is a really nice buff to it. Although, I mean, another common and very iconic Echo Saber builder is Monkey King, whereas the slow actually doesn't apply to the ultimate now because it got hot fixed. So kind of a weird kind of change. And Monkey King sometimes built Shadowblade, but with the slow no longer affecting his Wukong's command, it's just a lot worse. So yeah. As for the Bracer, Wraithband, and Null Talisman, if I'm honest, I don't know 100. My initial reaction, I think, is that they all, I think they got nerfed slightly. Because if you think about it, it's one less stat across the board, one being one less damage as well, because it's one less of the primary attribute you buy it to. It no longer provides magic resistance, which I think is a big reason why bracers were being picked up in the first place, because it's just being tankier. But now they provide damage, like a negligible amount of damage and a little bit of HP regen. So I feel there'll be a less built up of bracers in general. And I think the Wraith Band's still not bad because their attack speed is always nice on agi heroes, and Spellamp is still kind of decent on int. So I think Brace is the only one that kind of got nerfed, but just in general, seeing like they're exactly the same amount of money, but now you're losing one stat across the board for 1.5 armor. Is it really? Because it was always 5 attack speed before, I believe. I'm not really sure. I honestly, I don't. My initial hot take is that I don't think it's as good, and as a result of that, you're going to see other small items going to be giving more of a rise. Because normally, like I said before, you always want to have as a carry or any kind of core, you always want to have maybe 3 build-up items, and normally for a carry that was double Wraithband into Magic Wand. Whereas now, we might see rises of Orb of Venom as a start, like a build-up item, Windlace, Magic Wand, for example, yada yada yada. Because of this, overall, kind of nerfs towards all these kind of minor items as well. Small thing I want to talk about: Sage Mask was obviously a big hit, probably one of the best items in the game last patch, and that got nerfed significantly. From 1 to 0.6, even though they did reduce the mana cost, I think it's still about a 20% ish reduction in effectiveness from gold to mana regeneration. However, Ring of Regen actually kind of got buffed, and even though it reduces regen from 1.7 to 1.5, the cost was reduced by quite a lot. So overall, it kind of got better in effectiveness in terms of gold to HP regeneration. So it's like almost about, again, a very similar 20% kind of buff, although Ring of Regen doesn't really build into too many items that are particularly great this patch. If you've got Hood, Tranquil's got nerfed obviously a little bit. Headrest does build into mech and stuff. So a small thing, and with the change to actually the cost of Quelling Blade, we might see like early Ring of Regions just because it's a lot cheaper, but we will see. As for Kaya was the big kind of change here. I feel that it's just kind of worse on a few heroes and better on a few others, because they lost the mana loss reduction. So heroes like Storm, I think it got worse on, whereas heroes like Timbersaw, Leshrac got better because not only did it give them more mana regen, which is something that they want to play on, but it also it gives them spell at lifesteal amp, which they want to benefit from. Plus, Bloodstone now provides 10 magic resistance, and the cooldown is reduced, which is something that you'd always want to be using on Leshrac, which is the cooldown of Bloodstone. Whereas on Storm, you very rarely use the active on Bloodstone. An introduction of Voodoo Mask, kind of a interesting one, but I don't think it's particularly great. Although it should be said that the talent for Bristle is the same as a 900 gold item, so something to maybe think. But I don't think it's that good. 900 gold for 12% lifesteal isn't great. Plus, if you want to be having lifesteal, you want it late on, and you'll never have a starting item late on, obviously. About Discord, I think this one's quite nice actually. I think this actually is my item of the patch kind of thing, because I'm interested to sort of see how it will be played and built, because of the fact that I was actually, when I was playing support, I liked to build this item because it was nice kind of build up and it had nice attributes, and it was a great thing, particularly if you had any cores that were kind of spell based, because it's not really an item that cores wanted to build into, because it was normally getting replaced. But for supports, I think it's even better now because the cost is just a lot less. The recipe from 1150 to 650 is quite a big buff. And although attributes were reduced, for supports, attributes aren't the biggest thing, whereas cores attributes are normally preferred. So I think we might be seeing a lot more veils on supports, particularly heroes like maybe Witch Doctor, or heroes that have burst, like Lion, for example, could definitely incorporate it, I think. Nice change to Holy Locket can now be used on allies. I think this is actually a really nice kind of quality of life and a buff. Although I still think that we won't see Holy Locket for the heroes that don't buy it. So the heroes that buy it is kind of like maybe Chen, who would be building into mech and other healing things, as well as Io. But for the people who aren't those two heroes, I don't think we will see it just for this buff. But it's definitely nice because you can use it on allies. So if a hero's struggling with mana, or if you're playing against an EMP invoker, being using this on an ally can be useful if they need spells out. So Soul Ring no longer providing the HP regen, I think is a bit of a nerf, because the good thing about this is that the HP that you'd lose to consume for mana was eventually going to be reclaimed and regened through the item itself, through the HP regen, but it no longer provides that, but instead provides strength. So slightly better for heroes like DK that would prefer the strength over the HP regen, but small thing. Buff to Hyperstone, which is nice. In general, Battle Fury got a slight buff, I think, even though it lost 5 damage. Its recipe is reduced. The reason being is that when you get this item, it just accelerates your farming speed by loads. So it's worth getting it early and losing out some of the damage later on. Buff to Chrysalis, we might see Thompson just first picking and first buying Chrysalis early on, but we'll wait and see. Because I think for 200 gold, you'd be okay with losing 2 damage for 200 gold on the recipe there. Satanic got nerf, like, as well as the lifesteal amp as well in the general change we didn't mention, but Satanic and SNY definitely reduced its kind of potency. I think it needed to be, it's too strong. And Meteor Hammer, an interesting item as well. I saw BSG talking about it as potentially for agi heroes that don't have wave clear. Could be an item because the stun duration is reduced, so it's less about maybe the stun, more about the wave clear and the tower pressure. Plus that the stats and stuff are really nice for any kind of agi carry. But we'll wait and see for that because it's still 2,300 gold. So Yasha, I think, would still be better, but it does offer some nice stats for any kind of carries. Spirit Vessel kind of got a nerf because I think it's more really being used. It was before, it was being used just as a passive aura, whereas now I think it's more being highlighted for its active. So heroes like Invoker, I think it's still really good on because the active got a buff, but its kind of passive component got a nerf. Shiva's got a nice buff actually because the aura is now put on into that. I think Shiva's was one of the weaker luxury late game items, whereas now with this buff, I think it's very useful for ints dealing with tanky heroes. And Ice Guardy got a nice buff. Quelling Blade got a change. I mentioned that a little bit before. I think that that changes some starting items depending on who you are, and these items are all kind of buffs and nerfs depending whether they're too strong or too not. But I don't think they have too much implication. I think the biggest implication is probably actually Boots of Travel 2, because a 30-second cooldown to be anywhere on the map with your team is actually quite huge, actually. But we don't see Boots of Travel 2 too much, so it might not have a big impact on the grand scheme of things. Support's life got a bit easier with costs being cheaper and more sentry wards overall. And for the neutral items, just kind of buffs and nerfs throughout the board. So that's kind of the big implications and the things I wanted to talk about really for this patch. If there's anything that you think I missed or things you think are really impactful, please leave a comment down below, guys. And I hope to see you in another video, guys. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. Until then, arrivederci. Keep battling and grinding. Peace.